everyone. Welcome to the final SBK podcast of 2022. A very Merry Christmas to everyone. We're in that very strange middle period, and we have been enjoying some exceptional festive racing. And the last time I spoke to Ross Miller and Tom Collins, we were looking forward to a very profitable Christmas we were hoping for as well. And I hope that everyone was listening, because not only did Ross Miller deliver like the postman, I think he more delivered like Santa Claus, I hope, did for his kids and for TC's little one as well, because a winning nap in the shape of Accidental Legend at 7-2. Frodon was placed at 20-1 in the King George, and that big anti-post bet on the big dog, he did place at 16-1. He was a much shorter on the day, but all in all, a good day for Ross. TC, his Brave Man's Game anti-post selection for the King George came in, and his nap, while Sporting Mike was incredibly unlucky at Wetherby, one to follow through. So all in all, a Christmas to savour. Ross, I'll start with you first, because I know that you love Boxing Day. That is your day. That is your Christmas day. So I'm sure that you were pretty happy with what you saw.
Really happy with what I saw. And you know, as we mentioned before, Christmas, the fact we had that freeze meant there was plenty of big fields, plenty of good action. And I think wherever you were watching, whether it was Wetherby, whether it was Kempton, whether it was Exeter, there was really, really good racing. I enjoyed it. Bit of Lego building in between races. There's an awful lot of time on Boxing Day when you're hopping from channel to channel. But yeah, really enjoyed the racing. Thought the King George was a really fascinating race, and it goes again now this weekend into New Year.
Yeah, well, we'll get to New Year's Day, which is like a second Boxing Day with the amount of racing we've got. But let's quickly just have a look back and think back to that King George, because it was fascinating viewing. There was so much to take out of it. Obviously, Brave Man's Game, the winner, but that didn't tell the story of the race. For me, Le Presse was, I still believe, might be the best horse in that race to go forward from a Gold Cup perspective. But a lot, Ross, was spoken about the ride that Harry Cobden gave Brave Man's Game to win. It was, do you pick holes in his ride, or do you feel like he was left in quite an uncompromising position with Presse jumping out and annoying him throughout the most of the race?
Well, there's no such thing as a bad winning ride. Let's get that right. And when it mattered, he delivered up the home straight. I put on my social media that I can't remember seeing what I thought was a poorer Grade 1 winning ride, and I worded it very carefully. I didn't say it was a stinking ride. I didn't think it was a good Grade 1 winning ride. A few people, trainers, other people thought I was talking nonsense. Yeah, he did get compromised constantly by being out to the left-hand side of Presse. You simply ask, why line up outside Presse? I mean, I think anyone that watches racing knows that there was a very good chance Presse was going to jump out to his left. Maybe they walked the track and thought the ground was better down the middle. I'm not sure that the racing particularly proved that to be so. And I think it's one of those ones he got away with it. I think if he hadn't won, my social media would have been full of people jumping on saying what a horrific ride Harry Cobden's given Brave Man's Game. But he won. He got the job done. It showed the Brave Man's Game was by some distance the best horse on the day for that test, because he definitely lost lengths throughout the race. But no, I didn't think it was Harry Cobden's finest moment. But I suppose the mark of a good jockey is he didn't panic when he was out there, let the cards fall his way, and got the job done up the home straight.
What do you think as a Gold Cup prospect? They clearly are going to go straight there. They think that keeping him fresh is really important as well. Do you think he's the Gold Cup horse that you take from the race?
No, but I've got this horse wrong all the way along. I mean, let's not hide away from that. You have opinions, and my opinion on Brave Man's Game has been wrong at every point. He definitely stays 3 miles. I don't think he'll stay 3 1/4, but you know, I've been wrong so far. I'm just not sure that's his track. I'm not sure they think it's his track either. Still can't quite get over they pulled him out last year. And I'm not convinced he'll go for the Gold Cup. Allaho at the start of the year, like the penalty kick for the Ryanair. We haven't seen him yet. It's not an awful lot of strong words coming out that he's going to get there. I would, if I had to have an anti-post bet on Brave Man's Game, I'd have it on him for the Ryanair, because I think that's where he'll end up.
Yeah, I think they're just trying to give him all the best opportunities to be the in the best shape that he can be for the race, hence why they're not running him again. And that will mean he'll come into the race with just 2 runs under his belt this season, which has been widely slated in the past that we don't get to see these horses enough throughout the course of the season. But, Paul Nicholls has done it before, and he feels like this is the best way to get him to become a Gold Cup horse, TC. Do you think, you put him up as your King George selection a long time ago, but I think you said that this was his Gold Cup. That was always going to be his race. Do you think that they feel like they have to take their chances now for the big one? But do you see him being found out, especially with that slightly extra trip on such a tough undulating track?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything both you just said and Ross said there. I don't think the ride was spectacular. I thought it should have been inside L'Homme Pressé, and even if the ground is slightly better on the outside, you're not going to lose much by stepping one path to your right rather than one path to your left. And Brave Man's Game would have won a lot easier if that was the case. Look, I think he's got the talent to be in the Gold Cup. I think he should go there. I'm just going to actually relate this back to US racing, if I may. Like, life is good in the Breeders' Cup Classic. If you have a horse with such talent, you have to go for the biggest race. He could have run in any other race that he could have run in the Dirt Mile, any other one. But he had to take on Flightline because he is a horse of proper talent. And this is kind of the case with Brave Man's Game. You don't want to give up an opportunity of running in the biggest race at the festival, potentially the biggest race of the year over jumps. Grand National fans might disagree. So I think Paul Nicholls will send him there. I don't think the topography of Cheltenham will suit, much like Ross said. I don't think he'll necessarily stay the 3.25 miles overly well. And actually, I'd have him below the likes of Galopin des Champs and L'Homme Pressé come Cheltenham. But at the same time, I think this was the race of Brave Man's Game. This was when we were going to see Brave Man's Game at 100%. And he actually really impressed me with the way he found plenty in the home straight after suffering so much inconvenience through the race. Not only does that force Harry Cobden to go slightly to the left every time that L'Homme Pressé was going left, but it puts the horse off his rhythm. It loses momentum. And actually going into the fence, when L'Homme Pressé is starting to drift to his left, Brave Man's Game has to shorten up. He can't find that long stride that he did in the Charlie Hall. So plenty went against him, and he actually really impressed me with his finishing effort. But at the same time, he's not necessarily at the top of my shortlist for Cheltenham.
Okay, right. Interesting. Look, there was so much to take out from our Christmas period. We all have had a real look at the National Hunt horses from our previous podcasts, our National Hunt guides, essentially. We could be here all day picking apart what we saw, but there were probably a lot of horses, even beaten horses, that might be worth just pinpointing for the future before we go into our reviews before we go into our previews for the upcoming racing. And just wanted to quickly touch on one of them that might be a standout that you want to mention before we move on, Ross. We imagine that Dysart Dynamo was exactly what you were expecting to see over in Ireland, but was there anything else that you want to mention that you just really caught your eye over the last few days?
Yeah, Dysart Dynamo was what I was hoping I'd see. I certainly wasn't expecting it, and I was delighted to see him measure his fences and treat them with some respect. I think he's going to serve up to John Bond big time come Cheltenham. I'm really pleased with him. Fugitive was a novice chase I put up in the Ultimate podcast at the start of the season. He won really easily at Chepstow. Loved the soft ground, loved going up in trip. Really good ride by Gavin Sheehan. Be interested to see what the handicapper does to him on Tuesday. I think anything under £9 you'd be happy with. I think he's a horse going places. And then probably Vauban yesterday I thought was really eye-catching because the word all week was that they weren't expecting much. They thought he'd come forward. Sharjah was their best chance of getting close to State Man. And I think he probably got tired in the last sort of 100 yards. But also you have to take into account Danny Mullins was trying to go up the rail. Paul Town then left it open and then closed the door quite rightly. He had to snatch back, come round. Leopardstown is a very, very much stiffer track than it looks on the TV. That's not the point you want to be taking back. I think he's going to get much closer to State Man, if not in front of him at Cheltenham. I thought it was a really impressive performance.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think Willie Mullins was really taken by that performance in his first go in that kind of open grade and getting so close to State Man. TC, anything that took your eye, either jumped flat? You obviously had the all-weather action as well to get your teeth into.
Yeah, plenty of all-weather action. Actually, we're going to go to the jumps though, but it was a flat race, a bumper, and a horse from a bumper that really caught my eye, which was Fingal Bridge. He won the bumper at Chepstow on the 27th. I was at Kempton that day, had a few beers, few shandies, but I was watching the bumper in the in the hospitality area. And I was really impressed with his performance. He was drawing clear with a well-backed newcomer from Evan Williams' yard, who unfortunately stumbled and fell with a furlong to go, something you very rarely see. I think the horse is okay, but I could be wrong on that matter. But Fingerbridge looked like he was getting on top in the closing stages. He eventually won by 18 lengths in a bumper that looked to contain plenty of likeable types on paper, including Isaac de Zobo from the Paul Nicholls stable, who'd won on debut. I think this horse is only going to improve for hurdles, and especially a step up in trip. The testing conditions clearly suited him at Chepstow. So Fingerbridge is definitely a horse to keep on side, definitely in the short term, but even more so in the longer term.
Yeah, no, that's we always like these bumpers at this time of the year. They can be really informative. I was at Wincanton, which wasn't the priority race meeting on Boxing Day, but I loved that card. I thought there was some cracking racing, and it's well worth your while just looking back on some of the winners, because I think they could be quite informative. James Bowen had a double, and I think his two horses are horses to go forward with. Tweed Skirt, the mare, she won the novices limited handicap chase for mares, but I think it could be turned into quite a good race, beating Kisses for Katie for Jeremy Scott, who horses are running really well, and he hit the crossbar on several occasions throughout the course of the day, and actually had the winner of the last, which was a bumper in Golden Ace, and she's a daughter of Golden Horn that I think could be well worth following in, and what could be quite a decent bumper, just like TC was saying. I think that would be one of the more informative bumpers on the card that day. And the other horse is Steeler March, which for Nicky Henderson. And again, the second part of the double for James Bowen. And that form is going to tie in with a horse that I quite like coming up a little later on in our previews of the New Year's Day racing. So yes, right. That's our look back at what was over the Christmas period. We've got so much we could look at over the course of the next few days. We didn't want to completely dismiss the Challow Hurdle, which is coming up tomorrow on New Year's Eve, because really pleased to see that we've got quite a nice lineup of runners at Newbury. This race can sometimes be a bit disappointing, can be a bit overlooked. Also, it's an interesting one because you've got these novices. Some of them are stepping up in trip, whether that they will at quite an early stage of their career. And it has been a race that has been dominated by Paul Nicholls, who won it with Stage Star last year, and Braveman's Game the year before. He's got Hermes Allen at the top of the list, but interestingly, our Irish represented Joy Machine is in there for Paul Nolan, and Gordon Elliott is also sent over Kansas City Star. And in between that, we've got Attica for Nicky Henderson, Vicky Vale for Dan Skelton, Fergal O'Brien's got Crambo, and Accidental Agent. In general, Ross, it's a good looking race, because what's nice to see, obviously you mentioned it, potentially a lot of options for some of these trainers had to be dashed because of the big freeze, but also there's a good variety of trainers with nice looking novices at this stage of the season, which is healthy for racing.
Absolutely. It feels a bit of a throwback, doesn't it, that people are prepared to throw their hat into the ring and have a go because the soft options have been taken away. So let's hope someone takes notice and says, oh, if we take the soft options away, we might get more competitive racing. I mean, there's a bombshell for us all. But yeah, really competitive race. I think Hermes Allen was really impressive at Cheltenham last time, but I think he had nothing more than a canter round. I think he's a short price, and I don't like short price anyway, as you know, but for me, I just would want to see him do it in a race of this nature before I'm sold on him. You know, the form doesn't amount to much. We've all been caught. I mean, just didn't jump, as we've discussed before, was very slow. He's going to need 3 miles. Music Drive was beaten off a mark of 129 over the Christmas period, only finishing 9th in the per temps qualifier. Even allowing for the fact they might not want to win that, they don't want to be finishing 9th either. So I don't think the form is up to all that much. And I think there's loads that have got, loads more to give. I thought Attica was interesting. They were very convinced after he won at Cheltenham that he'll improve for a step up in trip. But I came down on 2 that I'd want to take 25 to 1 about to run into a place, and they've both got upsides. They can improve further still. Jamie Snowden, you wear it well. He's only won 2 moderate contests around Worcester and Hexham. He's done it really nicely each time. Was a bit keen the last time, but if he can relax in a big field, and I think there'll be enough pace on, I think he's interesting. He's a half brother to Prince Kaif and Shiprani, both much, much better when they went up in trip, and he gets £7. So his rating gives it him to do. The £7 takes him a little bit closer, and if he improves this step up in trip, I think he can go well. Gavin Sheehan's riding particularly well at the moment. And then the other one is the David Pike trained Thomas Moore, who won at Wincanton last time in one of the most bizarre races you'll ever see. I think the whole race just fell apart, but he did look relentless. He's won over 2 miles 7 previously. I think he might be one of these ones that hassles up Hermes Allen early. He'll definitely stay going. The long straight at Newbury should suit. I just thought he was interesting at a big price, having won 2 hurdles quite nicely.
Yeah, okay. Really intriguing types, those. I completely agree with you about Hermes Allen. That day at Cheltenham, he just went along on his own and did his own fractions out in front. There wasn't a huge amount of pace, and he just controlled the race. And as you say, I don't think it was the best of graded races at Cheltenham. It never normally is, really. It's very early on in the season. I just don't think he'll have his own way out in front here. It's a more of a competitive race. TC, do you agree?
No, absolutely not. And you know I don't, because you knew my selection coming into this pod. No, right, as we've touched on, there's a bigger field than anticipated. Usually, in the last 10 years, we've averaged 5.9 runners in this race. There's 14 this year. Maybe they don't fear Hermes Allen, or maybe a lot of trainers just think they've got a decent novice on their hands. I think this race is all about Hermes Allen. Yes, Ross has just made a case for a couple of big outsiders. We've also got Vicky Vale, who bolted up last time. Crambo's unbeaten. Attica represents Altior connections. Joya Mashan was impressive at Fairyhouse last time. But you have to run to a mark of around 150 to win the Challow. As a general rule, no horse in this race has shown enough ability to suggest they're capable yet of performing to that level, aside from Hermes Allen, who recorded an RPR of 142 at Cheltenham. That was a £15 step up on his previous effort, his rules debut. And let's not forget, this horse really impressed in a point-to-point, was purchased for 350k, quite expensive for a Paul Nicholls horse, I have to admit. And he's not done anything wrong so far under rules. Now, I know he's a short price, and value hunters, look, I wouldn't put you off going for something bigger odds like Ross has done there, a couple of big outsiders, if you're looking for the each-way play. But Hermes Allen jumps perfectly. He reminds me very much of Brave Man's Game, actually, in this race 2 years ago. Stage Star won it last year in a weak heat, but Paul Nicholls has won twice in the last 2 years. He always runs his best novice hurdler in this race, then sends him to the Ballymore. Maybe he's not the best Ballymore prospect in the world right now, but he's the best horse coming into the Challow, and I would be disappointed if he didn't beat this field.
Okay. You say that Paul Nicholls doesn't spend a lot of money. 370,000 on Brave Man's Game, 350 on this horse.
Look what Brave Man's Game's done.
Yeah, precisely. Brave Man's Game won this race 2 years ago. Potentially he's in the same sort of league at this stage as Brave Man's Game. But I'm with Ross here. I think that this race is fascinating because there's more contenders. They probably had quite an easy time the last couple of years. Paul Nicholls does good things in this race. I think that's an inflated mark, 100 RPR of 142, and even an official rating of 142 based on the runs that we've seen. 2 of them under rules, and both of them, one of them in a 5-runner race at Stratford, and that race at Cheltenham, I don't buy into. Happy to get egg in my face at some stage, but I think Attica is a better value price in around 9-10 to 1. Yes, his RPR or his rating is much lower, but I was really impressed by how he dictated the race at Cheltenham last time, and I'm pleased to see him stepping up in trip. He's bred to want further. Nicky Henderson's horses and these novices at this stage are in really good heart. There's going to be a lot of rain. There's I'm not too far away from Newbury here. And I do think that you'll want a horse that stays really well. Hermes Allen has been seen on quite decent ground recently. He did win. He was beaten on soft ground in his point-to-point earlier on in his career, and I just think that it might turn into a bit of a slog. It has been raining a lot over the last 24 hours. So interesting Challow Hurdle to look forward to tomorrow. That's the 31st of December, the final day of 2022. But we're going to move on to more pressing matters because we've got extremely competitive racing on the 1st of January 2023. I can't believe I'm saying that. And we're going to look at Cheltenham. The 155, as customary, the handicap chase run over 2 mile, 4.5 furlongs will take place. And we've got a really good feel to this race. It took me quite a while to come down on my selection. I thought that this was a race where you can make a case for a lot of them. Harry and Dan Skelton are represented by the favourite Midnight River, and 4-1 you can get for him at the moment. Il Rodotto 5-1, Brave Siaska and Shake 'em Up Harry 8, as well as Stolen Silver 8-1. Warlord 10-1, Happy Go Lucky 11, 16-1 for Coconut Splash, Demachine, Ed Underwho and Fantastic Lady, and 16-1 bar those. I mean, the Skeltons, that they've been absolutely farming these kind of races over the course of this first half of the season. And I think they'd be pleased, Ross, to have seen 4 winners on the 28th of December. It might have made up for a bit of a frustrating Boxing Day in the 27th. Obviously, Lac de Constance, one of the horses you were looking forward to seeing make that blunder in the way with Novices Chase. That was frustrating. But do they hold the key here for this race? Because there's plenty going for Midnight River.
It's got plenty going for them. I think they've been very in and out over the Christmas period. They've either run really well or they've run absolutely stinking. Like you say, Lac de Constance unseated, but he wasn't going anywhere near as well as you'd have expected him to go. Chamblou didn't raise a gallop. I just wonder that they're not all perhaps 100%. So that's straight away enough reason for me to pass him over. I don't think he's got stacks in hand off his mark anyway. 2 I came down on is, one is a horse I just absolutely love. I've followed him for a long time, and that's the Machine from Kerry Lee. He was a really smart novice chaser 2 seasons ago. Finished 4 lengths behind Remastered in the Reynoldstown when I don't think he stayed the 3-mile trip. Dropped back and then did very well that season, and then just disappeared last season, just never ran a race at all until having a wind up late in the season, bounced back in May and won a really competitive chase round Utoxeter, beat some decent horses in that. His return run at Newbury was really good. Bumped into Zanza, who I don't think anything would have beaten Zanza on that day. As we've discussed,
Form hasn't been frank though.
Zanza ran no race at all at Wetherby, but it's Wetherby, it's not Newbury. So I think you can put a line through that form. Zanza was really impressive on that occasion. The Machine did nothing wrong in behind him, was 2 lengths in front of the third horse, has had his mark unchanged, which if you took Zanza out that race, there's no way the handicapper was going to leave the Machine on 140. So I think that's a upside. He'll love the ground. I have a slight concern over the track for him, and he's been kept largely on flat tracks, but they have been a mixture of flat tracks, galloping tracks and sharp tracks, and he seems to cope. Ascot has a little bit of undulation, but nowhere near as much as Cheltenham, so that's a slight concern. Kerry Lee is very, very good at these handicaps at Cheltenham, so I'm really keen on him. And then the other one I came down on was Warlord, who I tipped for a similar race, the December Gold Cup that was frozen off. So I won't go over him too much. I think what we should say actually is that the novice chased him last year. I didn't think they were up to much, but Edward Stone and Blue Lord are maybe suggesting otherwise. They've probably stepped forwards, but suggest that the form wasn't perhaps as bad as we thought last year. He stayed on behind Edward Stone in the Arkle, having got outpaced down the hill, and was then beaten behind Miller's Bank over this trip at Aintree, when perhaps didn't run to his mark, having just come out of Cheltenham. His return run was disappointing in the Haldon Gold Cup at Exeter. I'll forgive that. I thought, he got outpaced at a crucial time. I think he'll definitely love this track. I think he'll love the trip. And I think off a mark of 148, he's still got room to work with. I think he's a smart horse, and I expect him to improve for this trip and track.
Yeah, Warlord and the Tizard team haven't had a bad old Christmas period, and he put plenty going for him. Demachine, I found it difficult not to put him up as well. I love the booking of Jonathan Burt back on board as well. And from a trends perspective, looking at this, tick so many boxes. And I know TC, you love a trend, but 10 of the last 10 winners aged between 7 and 9, tick for him. Season form, 10 out of 10 winners had at least 2 runs that season, tick for him. And 8 out of 10 winners were rated 140 or higher, tick for him. But the one thing, as you said, Ross, the track was not yet run at the track, so it's a complete unknown. So that was just the slight negative I had for him. But there was a lot of these sort of going through the trends. seeing essentially if they come into this race at that sort of prime. But it's really the Paddy Power Gold Cup form that will be tested, isn't it? The 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th from that race all coming into this. And Midnight River, obviously the best of that bunch. But ahead of all of them, French Dynamite ran well up to a point in the Savills Chase, I thought. Is that piece of form crucial to you, TC?
Yeah, I think it's the best piece of form coming into this race. I understand Ross's case for Warlord, by the way. He was the last off my shortlist, dropping down into handicap company but after facing loads of graded races. I think he's got a good chance. But I sided with 2 horses from the Paddy Power Gold Cup chase. Number 1 is Il Ridotto, unsurprisingly to many of the regular listeners and to both of you, I'm sure, because he was my horse to follow in the Ultimate Jumps preview podcast earlier this season. Thought he ran really well in a couple of races last year, especially at the Cheltenham Festival, where the ground just completely went against him. On a seasonal reappearance, first time up off a wind surgery and a long layoff, he ran a good 4th in that Gold Cup that we just touched on there. I thought he was travelling into the home straight like the best horse. Potentially kind of blew up between the second and the last, bungled the last as well, but he did keep up on the hill, which I think was a big positive for him. He's had 50 days off since, which will keep him fresh, and we know he goes well fresh. Cheltenham is absolutely perfect. And given Paul Nicholls tends to give his influenza jabs to his horses in January, the fact that this race is now coming at the start of the month and just before the jabs, I think this is going to be his Gold Cup in effect, because going into Cheltenham, I think they're a better Irish opposition. You're going to get a stronger English opposition as well. I think this is the race that you want to be backing Il Ridotto. And I know he's a shortish price, but a mark of 139. I don't understand how the handicapper dropped him £1 for that effort. I think it was a really respectable performance. And he's definitely well treated, despite not ticking many of the trends. And the other horse I'm keen to back is Stolen Silver, who also ran in that Gold Cup. He was sent a 4-1 favourite. He unseated Santos and Davis. Generally a very good jumper, though. I just think he was in behind horses. The pace quickened. He was unsighted. And unfortunately brushed through the top and made a bad mistake. Coming into this race, Stolen Silver, again, this could be his Gold Cup. Cheltenham is ideal for him. He's already won over course and distance. I think he's well treated. And don't forget the fact this horse beat Edwardstone in the novice hurdle back in 2020. He has loads of talent. He's rated quite high. He's got a reasonable weight. But at the same time, he's well capable of running in graded races. So I think Stolen Silver is interesting at a slightly bigger price. But Il Ridotto will be my main play.
Okay, Il Ridotto 5-1. I assume you wouldn't want it to go any shorter than that. And Stolen Silver 8-1 for you there. In a race where they're evenly matched based on prices as well. Demachine, I should mention, 16-1 for Ross, and Warlord 10-1 as it stands. We're all kind of, I think the fact that we've all got different sections that you can make a case for a lot of these. I'm going to quickly give you Happy Go Lucky at 11-1. Yes, there's a lot of good form from that Paddy Power Gold Cup, but I don't think there's anything to put down too negatively against the rehearsal handicap chase form from Newcastle, where Happy Go Lucky was just behind Into Overdrive, who obviously has gone on and won himself on Boxing Day in the Roland Merrick and looks like a really progressive type, and L'Empresse as well, who obviously unseated at the last in the King George, and even though he was jumping left, he was going to finish off quite a solid race regardless. And we know how good he is, and Happy Go Lucky to run the way he did after such a long layoff. He is quite high in the handicap, but I think he's still a class act. He's a horse that I followed massively when he was last seen with a full season back in 2021, and I think that he possibly gone up £1 for that last run, but I just think that he's a horse that loves it around Cheltenham. He'll be seen to really good effect back there, and I'm happy for him at a good each way price there at 11-1. The other one that I'm going to side with, and I couldn't pick between Demachine and Coconut Splash, but I just fell down on Coconut Splash because he's got a lot of the same attributes that Demachine I thought had. He's a very solid, likable horse. He's had his ups and downs. He's clearly been fragile. I think that he ran a really good race again behind another horse that I like, Into Overdrive, last time out at Wetherby. He's got a really nice racing weight here of 10.5, and a horse that was once seen as a real live contender in things like the Grand Nationals, and he's a horse that I think Evan Williams is just just been able to figure out and sort out. And I think that maybe they might just have him back to slightly near his best. And I don't think he should be out of this at 16-1. So that is what looks to be one of our best and most fascinating handicaps on the day at Cheltenham. But there's plenty of good racing in and outside of just Cheltenham. We've got, as I said earlier, it's like Boxing Day. It's another treat for us. We're going to hear from Ross and TC from their naps. Ross, I'll start with you first because you were on a bit of a roll, and we like to hope it's going to continue into this New Year's period, please.
Let's hope so. The nap comes in the 120 at Cheltenham. The Ollie Murphy trained Thunder Rock. He's looked much, much better over chase fences than he has over hurdles. A really good example of a horse. He's jumping, carrying it to a much higher mark. He's won over 2 mile on good ground, up to 2 mile 3 at Ascot last time on slightly softer ground, and just looked really solid. Solo franked that form to some degree at Kempton over the Christmas period. And he's up against Monmorel, who I'd be surprised if the track suits. Doesn't look like a particularly balanced horse to me. He's definitely going to want every drop of rain that's going to fall because the ground is currently described as good at Cheltenham at the moment. There is rain forecast for Saturday, but not all that much. Monmorel is the favourite. I think the market's got this the wrong way round. Even on ratings, Thunder Rock is £2 higher than him. And the fact he's not favourite means he's a decent price. So I think he'll win that. And then my next best unusually comes in the bumper, and a juvenile bumper at that, the 340 at Cheltenham. But Dancing in Brazil really caught my eye last time at Huntingdon. Travelled very well through the race. And then as Tom Cannon came to make his move, he went to switch out and the horse that he was tracking drifted out. He went to switch in and the horse he was tracking drifted in. He had to snatch a 3-year-old around quite a little bit before he could get him out and get him running. Didn't make any difference. This horse took off, won very easily. This stiffer track is going to suit. He's by a sire called Blue Brazil. And I mean, just this Christmas period alone, Blue Brazil has had Good Land, who won yesterday, Blue Your Lord, In the Pocket, Billy Boy Blue, Royal Pagaille, and then a fairly promising hurdler called Constitution Hill. He's the sire to follow at the moment from a good family of a mare called Hora, who had Lisp and Thomas Campbell, who were decent horses themselves. I think this Dancing in Brazil looks like a really smart prospect. With Alan King, trains on the flat. I quite like that angle, training on the flat, having 3-year-old bumper runners. I think there might be a bit of an advantage there. I'd be disappointed if he doesn't go very close in the last race on New Year's Day.
Okay, thank you, Ross. We got Nap, Thunder Rock, and the next best, Dancing in Brazil. Okay, we'll head over to TC now for your 2 selections.
Yeah, so my nap comes on the flat, surprisingly. The 216 at Southwell on New Year's Day, a horse called Mayfair Gold. She's a filly. She's only had 4 starts, also trained by Alan King. First time up, she bumped into subsequent Group 1 Sun Chariot runner-up Laurel in a maiden at Kempton that's thrown up 4 subsequent winners. It was a really good heat. She ran 7th, but she was facing better opposition. Next time, she finished 2nd to a Godolphin filly, who they consider pretty good. We bumped into an absolute machine trained by the Crisfords last time. Go search that horse up. I won't give you the name just because I want to back her next time up. Her final start in maiden company came on December the 1st at Chelmsford. Again, she filled the runner-up berth, this time behind a horse called Capital Theory, trained by the Johnstons. Capital Theory's won both subsequent outings, absolutely bolted up at Chelmsford, but has bolted up twice since, and is going to be rated in the high 80s, I imagine, after winning just 3 days ago. And then finally, last time, moved into handicap company. Again, Mayfair Gold 2nd, 3 seconds in a row. So people would look at that and think, maybe she doesn't have the characteristics or she doesn't have the guts to win a race. But she's been bumping into good horses. Last time, off a mark of 66, she ran into a horse trained by David O'Mara, owned by the Horse Watchers, completing a double, and was only beating half a length by the horse Star Sheba at Lingfield. I thought it was another very good effort. The handicap has put her up £1, which is very fair. She had to go through a really tight gap that day, only 4th start. Inexperienced horses sometimes shirk away from that kind of a challenge that represents they need to put their guts and determination to go through a tiny gap, and she did it. She just came up 2nd best. This looks an easier task. Not 100% sure that Southwell will suit her, but she's definitely got talent. She's much better than her mark. And the next best, I'm kind of cheating here, Jess, because I was looking at New Year's Day. There wasn't too many horses that I fancied aside from the races that we've covered. So I thought, why not? New Year's Eve. And it's also a bumper, the 320 at Warwick, a horse called Katate Dory. Now, I restarted my tracker at the start of this jump season, thinking that I've got some old horses in there that I didn't really want to follow going forward. I was getting the emails, and you know when you get the emails for tracker, and you're just like, actually, I don't really want to back that horse. So I restarted it. I thought, I'm going to stick to just bumper horses and novice hurdlers with the idea of having this tracker for a longer term. I only got 2 horses in there so far, and Kate Dory is one. First time up, was sent off 11-4 favourite in a listed bumper at Cheltenham's November meeting. Got outpaced coming down the hill and turning in. Found himself 6 lengths behind the leaders, but really stayed on the hill, up the hill really nicely. He's shaped like a horse who's only going to get better for a longer trip in time. He's running over 2 miles here at Warwick, but it's an easier contest. And the fact that there's an unbeaten Henry Daly trainee at the top of the market, at the top of the weight, giving weight away, I think will keep Kate Dory's price reasonably respectable. I'm going to be having a decent sized wager on him on New Year's Eve.
Oh, exciting. Okay, Kate Dory and Mayfair Gold with the Japanese superstar Holly Doyle back over from her adventures over there, and she's back in action at Lingfield and in Southwell, and she'll be on board Mayfair Gold. So exciting selections to keep you interested on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day from TC. We thank you for that. I've got a couple for you. They're back at Cheltenham. One of them is in the 3:05, 3-mile handicap hurdle, a Buffalo Soldier. He's up £6 from his win at Newbury, where he gave Warren Great Tricks a real kick that day. He has started the season slow enough, but then he's really picked up in November, and the last few days he's just been absolutely flying. I've seen 3 winners over the course of 2 days from just a handful of runners. He's actually been teaming up with James Bowen very successfully, and James Bowen, I'm trying to work it out, and probably someone cleverer than me can, but I think the ride on a Buffalo Soldier that James Bowen gave was one of the first rides he's had for Warren Great Tricks, and that was obviously a winning one. James Bowen is booked down to ride Call Me Lord for his boss, Nicky Henderson, but he's got Brendan Powell stepping in, which is no mean feat at all. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, the form has been frank. Steeler March, I saw winning at Wincanton very impressively. He's a horse on the up, and a Buffalo Soldier stayed on really strongly to beat him that time. He's obviously up in grade just slightly. This is a good race, but I think that he's still probably on the right side of the handicapper, because there are horses in here like Call Me Lord, Dolphin Square, and Thomas Darby, who are just on terribly handicapped at this stage. So it's just sort of helping him in this race. So I'm looking forward to seeing a Buffalo Soldier. And my final selection is Nappers Hill in the Challow Hurdle. Not a race I normally like to bet in. It's always a bit of a tricky one. You can find slight rogues in here running over this 2-mile, 4.5 furlong race. Mary's Rock is in here for Nicky Henderson and Nico de Boinville. She's in against, she's been racing predominantly against mares, so she's stepping outside of that company. She might just find it a little harder. Her jumping wasn't perfect for me last time, and I think she might struggle here against some likeable types. And Nappers Hill has been nothing but improving this season for Paul Nicholls. He'll want the ground to not get any worse than good, which it is at the moment. Potentially they could be getting more rain, but it doesn't seem like Cheltenham gets any. If it is, it just sort of manages to dry up quite quickly. So I'll be intrigued to see if the rain that they've got in the weather forecast does materialise, because if it doesn't, Nappers Hill is the one that I like in this race. So those are 2 more from Cheltenham and what's a really, really busy day. We hope that we've given you plenty to look forward to over the next couple of days. A reminder that new SBK customers can get £30 in free bets by betting £10. T's and C's always apply. A big thank you to everyone for listening to us throughout the course of 2022. Hopefully we've given you a few winners over the course of this year. We will be back for 2023, so remember to subscribe so you've got us to look forward to. We can be your New Year's resolution, maybe, to listen to us a little bit more when you subscribe to our channel, and you won't be forgetting. We're also on YouTube, and we've got plenty of podcast content there, and there's our SBK ambassador content as well, and there are blogs that you can read from TC and Ross Miller. So a happy New Year to you all. Happy New Year to you, Tom, and to Ross, and we'll see you next year.